All right. Welcome, everybody. Today we are here with Dr. Kynda Curtis from the Utah State University Extension, and she's going to talk a bit about how COVID-19 is impacting our local food systems. Take it away, Kynda.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm a professor at Utah State University. Been there about 10 years and was here at UNR previous to that. I've spent my entire career, so like the last 18 years, working in local food systems, specifically working with small urban farmers on developing new markets. So the majority of my research and teaching and extension work involves that. Also with specialty food labeling, consumer concerns about different types of labels or different types of production, that type of thing. So lately, in my extension role at Utah State, I've been doing a lot of work with COVID-19 and helping producers pivot or adjust to some of the changes that are happening. Some of those changes are positive, some are not. And so I'll talk a little bit about that today. So I am posting a weekly blog, and I'd like to encourage you to read that if you'd like. It's called Marketing in Motion, and we'll provide the web link to that later in the session. So yeah, thanks for having me.
So Kynda, how specifically are small-scale farmers and ranchers being impacted by COVID-19 right now?
Okay. Yeah, as I mentioned, there's some good news and there's some bad news. And by small scale, I thought maybe I should define that a little bit. Usually we're thinking of less than 50 acres, but oftentimes as small as 1 and 2 acres. With ranchers, we're looking at less than 20 head, less than 50 head, something like that. That's definition. And a lot of our small scale growers are in urban areas or tend to be in urban areas. We've had in the Salt Lake City area in Utah, we had a lot of backyard urban farmers. And so we've been working with that quite a bit over the last 10 years. A couple of things have happened. Initially, there was, of course, with the restaurant closings, a huge drop off in the restaurant business. Many small scale growers have been working with restaurants many hours, many years to establish those relationships. And so with the loss of that market, if that was a large part of their marketing, that was a huge impact right away, and not a good one. As I mentioned, they put a lot of effort into maintaining those relationships. And another one is schools. I know here in Nevada, there isn't a lot of farm to school happening, but that was something that was doing fairly well in the greater Salt Lake area, Wasatch Front, so in northern Nevada along the I-15 corridor. And so that was maybe even more so for the small growers in that area. More of an impact was the loss of schools. And then not so much today, but 4 or 5 weeks ago when this started to became an issue, whether farmers markets would happen at all was a question. And if they would, what would they look like? And that type of thing. And that, I think, for Utah and for Nevada has been solved somewhat. There's going to be changes. There are going to be some closures. So that there was a lot of nervousness 4 or 5 weeks ago among growers as to what they would be doing. And with the farmers markets, even though a lot of them had CSA programs or sold online, that was still a pretty big portion of people's marketing was selling at farmers markets. I was just looking at the Reno area, and it looks like Shirley's Markets here in Reno, who they have the Village Market on California and also Tamarack Junction, they're planning on opening following new distance and sanitary regulations. It looks like, unfortunately, the city of Reno isn't going to offer the Riverside Farmers Market. Carson City is supposed to open, and so those are the more ones closer to the more urban areas around here. Another thing that's, I guess, a worry or concern is a lot of the small restaurants, many of which who are championing buying local foods, some of them may be opening again, some and not at all. Unfortunately, I don't know if you saw it, but 4th Street Bistro in Reno announced yesterday that they will not be opening up again. And so that's a loss. I mean, Natalie Sellers, she's been running that restaurant, the head chef there and owner for 20 years. And she was an initial champion of the kind of the local foods, especially foods and restaurants in Reno. So I remember seeing her shopping at farmers markets in 2005, 2006, and being like, oh, that looks really good, and wanting to go eat there that evening. So anyway, so that's another thing. Some of these restaurants may not open or may open in a different way. And so that for growers working with restaurants, that was a big deal. With the changes in the farmers markets, now we're seeing more will be open, but they're going to have distancing, cleaning regulations. Booths will be far spaced out. They'll have one-way directional. And I think a lot of farmers are trying to figure out if actually selling at those farmers markets is going to be profitable for them. A lot of them do a lot of sampling, so tasting, to try and entice consumers to buy from their booth. They're not going to be allowed to do that, and that could make some big differences. Another issue is that for growers who were growing for restaurants, the things they were growing, things that chefs wanted, and specialty products, varieties, regular consumers may not know what to do with or be interested in. So that's another issue. And a lot of them had seed in the ground already or had starts going. And so pivoting products is going to be difficult, even if they're doing a CSA now instead, or doing a farm stand. And I'll talk more about how farmers have pivoted and kind of taken advantage of some of the changes in consumer interest a little later today.
Great. How have consumers been reacting?
Okay, well, that's kind of what I would consider some of the good news in this whole story, especially for small and urban farms and ranches. There was a good segment of consumers, last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, that were very interested in buying local products, buying organic products. They had different reasons for wanting to do so, but we were talking about maybe 3-4% of the population that was even thought of that as a concern, as something they wanted to do. Now, I don't have the exact numbers, but that is much higher. People are much more concerned about where their food comes from right now. They're seeing supermarkets. I think it's better today, but 3 or 4 weeks ago that had empty shelves. There's been a lot of media on potential problems in the meat supply and meat processing closures across the country. So they're worried about food availability. They're worried about safety, sanitary issues maybe with the food we're having. And so with that, we're seeing, uptakes in CSA memberships of anywhere from, say, 30 to 500%, depending on where in the country and which program we're looking at. CSA is a community-supported ag program, which means that people buy a box every week, or they pay for a full season of boxes in advance. So it's basically allows farmers to sell their product in advance, and consumers pick up, or they have their box each week delivered. So, farmers market attendance where markets were open in some parts of the country was higher than usual. Uptake in online sales. There was a meat producer who was featured in an article last week, and he says that his online sales have gone up by 500%. So a lot of changes there, a lot of people looking to buy locally because of, I think, concerns about food availability in the future. And consumer spending across the country on food is up. Nationwide, we're at 20%. In Nevada, up 32.6%. So we're spending a lot more on food. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that people are eating now at home and not at school or not at work. Obviously, the food at home consumption has gone up. That's not just because of spending on local food. So another thing we're seeing is a lot of interest in home gardening and buying bulk. With that, people have foods that are non-processed. And so maybe they're not used to having to fully cook meals or to having to store things and that type of thing. And so we're seeing a lot more demand, especially in extension. We're seeing a lot of demand for courses on that. People are even considering, slaughtering and packaging animals and poultry and things like that. And so we're seeing a lot of changes and a movement kind of back to home gardening as well, so that people can take more control over the food that they're going to have.
You mentioned farmers having to kind of shift operations a little bit and change what they're doing. What are you seeing?
Okay, so one of the major things is those who were selling into schools or selling into restaurants, they basically had to shift to totally different markets or maybe scale up other avenues that they were already using. So farm stands is one. There's growers that I'm familiar with who hadn't done farm stands in the past that have added them to their basket of markets that there are others who are planning to do CSAs this year that hadn't done them in the past, or because the consumer demand for CSA programs has gone up so much, current programs are looking for new farmers and ranchers to be involved. And so that's another one. Obviously, and going to online sales. So whether they had a website or not, trying to put the ability to sell online, either individual items or even the basket, so more of the CSA approach. Unfortunately, a lot of small producers didn't have a lot of online solutions that they were using at the time, so there's been a huge demand for information on how to use social media, advertising, sales, how to run a website, and how to do sales and delivery through those types of things. I recently did a survey of small and urban growers in Utah, and 37% of those who hadn't done a CSA ever before plan to do one this year. And 53% who had never sold online plan to do so this year. So those are examples of things that are going on. And 31% plan to put in a website, and 42% that hadn't done social media in the past plan to do so this summer. So that's just an illustration. In Nevada, 50% of people who hadn't done CSAs in the past plan to do so. 25% who hadn't done online sales plan to do so. And then one interesting difference between the two states is that putting in a website was the same as Utah was 31%, but then emails and newsletters, so more simplified online marketing was popular in Nevada, with 26% saying that they were wanting to do that. And that's something that's fairly straightforward and simple. And so I don't blame them for looking to that to try and create new markets for their foods and things like that. So yeah, in my blog, I've spent the last 4 weeks just talking about online sales platforms and opportunities, and where to go for information, and which platforms and the different types that they have, and how they can be used. And we're seeing in the survey I just mentioned that that's the biggest piece of information people are looking for, is how to take more control over their markets and not be at the mercy of the city or the farmers market manager and that type of thing, and be able to sell and distribute more things online.
So it sounds like a lot of entrepreneurial activity is happening.
Yeah, definitely. Not surprising. It's an entrepreneurial group, but I feel like from the input I've gotten from the growers that, it's not an ideal situation, but they're using I guess the positive in this, and that consumers are more interested in local foods to try new things and move into other things. And I think the long-term investment into online sales will pay off well for them in the future. That's something that probably should have been done earlier, or could have been done earlier. I know we all have hesitate to try new software and try new online things. To do my blog, I had to, basically learn how to do website management that I hadn't done before myself. And so, it's new, and it's a little scary, but I think it'll pay off well for them in the end by doing those things now.
Very cool. Yeah. So it sounds like we might have some upcoming opportunities for future discussions about how to market and develop your own website and things like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Very cool. I know this is a question everybody is focused on, is on the policy level. So what's happening there? What can we, what do we see?
Right. Well, I'm trying to make recommendations, and we need to do more research on this as well, as to how policies can be amended or implemented to help foster local growers and local food systems in the future. And there's such drastic differences between states right now. Some states have things that are already there that they're amending or not amending. Some states don't have any regulations or laws in place, and so growers have to get started, actually go to their legislature. It's kind of a long process, as you know, to get this started. I can say that we have a group in Utah, Sarah Peterson, who runs Red Acre Farm. They have Red Acre Center. They've been lobbying for herd shares and raw milk and changes in cottage food laws like every year. And so we actually in Utah are pretty well set up for this. And I think our Department of Ag and Food has done well also at making adjustments to try and make it easier for growers to sell to different markets than they had planned, and that type of thing. Some suggestions and some things that have been going on in other states would be to enable sales of individual meat cuts to consumers, either through adding state inspections that weren't there before, or expanding them so that private and custom houses can actually be used to label for consumer sales. I know they just started that in Utah about 2 weeks ago. And then Wyoming implemented just lately a herd share program, so people can buy into a herd share, and then they can sell the cuts from that herd share directly to consumers. Utah already had a herd share program. Another thing is cottage food. Utah, Nevada, surrounding states have cottage food laws, and I think that they were instrumental in helping provide small growers annual set of things they could sell by doing canning and those types of things, providing steady stream income. But some of them are very restrictive. They don't allow sales to grocery stores or to retail, or they certainly can't go across state lines. And so amending those particular laws and regs to be a little bit more flexible, or at least allowing that flexibility in these times of pandemic or unusual circumstances, is a suggestion, especially in Western Nevada. You guys are very close to the California border, and maybe having the ability to move things across state lines within a certain distance out of the cottage food would be good. In some states, they actually declared cottage food non-essential, and so those haven't even been able to produce and sell at all. I think that's kind of a strange thing to do, given that it is food, but that did happen. Also, any programs that purchase and resell. So they're doing this in Utah right now. They're basically buying farm products from local growers. They are packaging them in a way that the food bank would want, or local grocery stores would want. They're helping facilitate those new markets. And again, this is it's a government program. It's paid for by tax dollars, but it is a program that is helping to facilitate new markets and connections. And so, especially in a time like a pandemic or other type of odd time, that's something that would work well. Another would be to enable sale of more farm products through raw milk, raw butter, farm-based slaughter, having agritourism, food tourism laws in place. Those types of things would be suggested. But yeah, the policy and the somewhat flexing but safe of policy during these times is very important. And I think that each area, consumers have their own concerns, policymakers have their own concerns, but anything that can be done to enable growers to sell to people who are actually looking for the food is very helpful.
What are some of the options for consumers here in Nevada?
Okay, so again, I work out of Utah, but the ones that I'm aware of, especially in Western Nevada here, are the Fallon Food Hub. They work out of Fallon but distribute across basically northwestern Nevada. They told me that they're up about 35% in their subscriptions right now, and they've sold out of their egg and their meat share, but they have about 25 openings still, and so they're still looking for people. The Great Basin Community Co-op, which started here in Reno at a very small house, now as you know, has a nice facility in Reno, and they also have the Drop Co-op. That's a sister company that anyone can go in and create an account and order on, and then they deliver it. Now they're delivering it to your house. They're charging $11 for that delivery. So that's another option for people looking for local foods in this area. The Tahoe Food Hub has a store up in Tahoe, and they're also doing delivery. There's also a number of CSA programs and a number of farmers markets, of course, and Edible Reno Tahoe and Nevada Grown have great directories for those businesses. They also have directories of restaurants who do purchase local. And as those restaurants, hopefully a lot of them will come back online. If you want to support local growers, those are a good place too. either do your pickup, curbside pickup, or dine if you want to do so. So there are great options here. You know, it's interesting looking at the difference between Reno and Salt Lake, and how each one has some great things going that the other one doesn't, and you know, how things grow and change over time. It's just interesting to see, you know, the differences between the two areas. And anyway, Reno has some great possibilities. I did hear from managers at the Great Basin Food Co-op that they feel like more arrangements with grocery and getting Nevada products into the grocery store is something they feel needs to have more done of, because now it's very hard. Other than some Perry & Sons fresh pack stuff, you just don't see that as much in local grocery stores. That was a recommendation or a change that they thought that would be good in the future to expand the local food system here in the greater Reno area.
Fantastic. A lot of great information. Any final thoughts that you want to add? And then maybe we have a room full of experts that might
Sure.
want
So I wanted to, and again, I know you'll put this information up later, but for those who want to follow along kind of with local food system trends across the nation, a magazine called Civil Eats has been doing an excellent job at that. And so I would encourage you to look at their website, as well as a New York Times food section. They've also been doing a great job. And then I've seen a few articles in Modern Farmer, Western Producer, and then NPR, National Public Radio, actually this last week has had 2 really good articles. And there are several that you can see on kind of the expanding demand for CSAs around the country. And some of the need to not get rid of traditional food systems, but to try to grow our local food systems to be more complete. So, you know, add things like millers and processors and butchers, and so we have a more robust local food system in place. And it's not just growers and chefs or growers and co-ops. We need, you know, to have more of those taking place. It was interesting. So Michael Pollan is in the news again, and recommending, you know, at this point, strangely enough, we actually need a few more middlemen. And I'm not always a fan of his, I'll admit, but I can't disagree with him on that there's things missing now. It would be nice to have them around, but of course there has to be a demand for it, and they have to prepare a role that they get paid for. So something to think about in the future. Also, I have the Marketing in Motion blog that's on the USU Extension website that anyone's welcome to. And also, if you're curious about what a CSA is, or you know, why people go to farmers markets, or you know, the different markets and who people are, I've got a number of extension publications that can be searched for there. And then if you're interested in food and agritourism, Susan Slocum, who's actually a graduate of UNR, and we wrote a book on food and agricultural tourism. So that's available through Amazon.com. So I would encourage you to take a look at that if that's something that's of interest to you. So, but thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. And we'll make sure to put all this up on the final video. And any questions before we?
Yes, I have a question. Kynda, do you see the long-term sustainability? Do you think that the demand in these local food systems is going to continue to increase?
I think that a certain section of people who have made changes because of this, maybe they've decided to, buy meat from a local rancher, or they've enrolled in a CSA program for the first time. I don't think they're all going to stop doing that. I think that a certain amount of them will stick with this in the future, even if, you know, COVID becomes a non-issue. Will we have expansive growth going forward forever? No, I don't think so. I think what was great, so through the recession we had, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, what was great to see that local food demand continued through that, even though people were food insecure, people were losing their jobs, losing their houses. We saw kind of a steady demand in local foods, and even in organics as well. And I think that it'll probably happen again this time because people will see the change and continue with those habits. Will everyone do that? No. Some people will go back to the way they were doing things before. But I think that the idea that people will stop buying local if they started it all of a sudden, I don't think that's going to happen.
Any other questions or final thoughts? Going once. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Curtis. We will get this up online and encourage folks to contact you for more about, what's happening with local local operations. And we know this information might be a moving target just because of the nature of this pandemic. So we're going to try to continue to do these once a week, and stay tuned for more.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.